laying down on the beach, enjoying the breeze with a computer in one hand and a martini in the other. That is what everyone thinks of when they think of remote work, but is that really accurate? Do you want to work remotely for a company that cares about you, all while traveling the world? I mean, duh, that sounds amazing, and luckily for you, today's video sponsor X-Team is offering you just that. X-Team is an entirely remote company, but what separates them from most other companies is their focus and dedication on making you the most energized and best version of yourself. They allow you to travel the entire world across multiple different countries in their different houses they have set up. They provide you different stipends for continuing education and just doing things that you enjoy that energize you. And on top of that, you get to do all of this while working with some of the biggest companies in the entire world. This means that you can take advantage of all of the great benefits of remote work, such as freedom and travel, without any of the negatives generally associated with remote work. So if this at all sounds interesting, make sure you use the link xteam.com/WDS, it'll be down in the description, and apply for a job at X-Team now. Welcome back to Web Dev Simplified. My name is Kyle, and my job is to simplify the web for you so you can start building your dream project sooner. So if that sounds interesting, make sure you subscribe to my channel for more videos just like this. Now in this video, I want to talk about remote work. I want to specifically talk about all of the different myths behind remote work because there is a lot of hard facts about remote work many people don't consider, and as soon as they get into their first remote work job, they realize it is not for them. So in this video, I'm going to teach you if remote work is right for you and how you can determine how to choose the best remote job. By far, the best part about working a remote job is the freedom to set your own hours, the freedom to work when you want, where you want, how you want. I mean, that is an amazing feeling when you work remote. And when you start, you're like, yeah, this is awesome. I can work at midnight if I want. I can take the whole day off and work all night. It doesn't matter. I can do whatever I want. I can work in a coffee shop. I can work wherever in my home. It doesn't matter. And that's really fun. But then you start to realize that you can work whenever you want. And that starts to become you work all the time. Instead of just, doing a normal 9 to 5, you start working 9 to 6, 9 to 7, 9 to 9. And you realize that you never really stop working because you don't have that hard shut off that you do in the office. If you go into an office, you get there at 9 o'clock, for example, you work, and then around 11, 12 o'clock, everyone starts taking lunch. So obviously you go join them, you take a nice long lunch, you chat with people in the office, then you go back to work, you work. And then around 5, 6 o'clock, people start leaving. So you kind of get the message and you start leaving with them. That's what happens in a normal office. But when you work from home, you get up, maybe you get up at your normal time as if you went to the office at 9, but you don't have that commute. So now you start working at 8 because you're like, well, I'm ready. Might as well start working. And you work and you realize it's 2 o'clock and you still haven't eaten lunch yet. So you grab some lunch and you eat in front of your computer while you're working, and you work. And before you know it, it's 7 o'clock at night and you're like, holy crap, where'd all the time go? I should probably start working. It's super easy to kind of get engrossed into what you're doing and kind of forget about time and to just work all the time. Especially because since you're in your house, for example, if you're working remote from your house, you don't have that nice hard boundary of driving to and from work. So now your commute is essentially walking from your bedroom to your office. So you really don't have a good indicator of where your work starts and where your work ends because you're working in the same place you're having fun. So being able to switch between working and having fun, or going from having fun to working, is very difficult. And this is also another problem where it's very easy to slack off when you're working remotely because, you have fun at your house. You're watching movies, you're, playing games, doing whatever you're doing. So then when you need to switch from having fun to doing work, you go to bed, you wake up the next day, you need to start working, but you're working in the same place that you're having fun. It's really difficult to do, and it's difficult to switch your brain to do that. So not only is it hard to stop working, but it's also hard to start working. And it requires a certain level of self-discipline in order to work the hours you need to work without working extra and without working less. I know since this whole coronavirus situation happened and a lot of people are working from home, a lot of companies have noticed that more and more employees are messaging each other and sending messages late at night, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 o'clock at night, when normally nobody would be working at those hours. Because it's so easy when you're working from home to just open up your computer and send a message, or open it up and read a message because you're in the same place that you work all the time. So it's really important to set yourself those boundaries to make sure you don't overwork yourself and you don't underwork yourself. But if you're able to set yourself those boundaries, it's amazingly freeing being able to work the hours that you want in the locations that you want, and I highly recommend it for anyone that can do that. Now, the next thing that is difficult is something a lot of people don't think about, and that is the ability to work across different time zones, especially if you're in a company that is, entirely remote or mostly remote, because that means you may have other coworkers that live on the entire other side of the globe. They're 12 hours ahead of you, time wise. So it's very hard to find good meeting times where everybody's available at the same time, because while it's noon for you, it may be midnight for someone else. So when you're working remote, especially in an all remote team, having those types of company wide or even just group wide meetings is difficult because not everybody's on the same time zone. So you may have certain restrictions in your hours where you need to be available for certain meetings that happen at possibly less than ideal times just because of the time zone you're in versus the time zone that everyone else may be in. For example, if you live in Australia and everyone in the other company that you work for lives in the United States, you're going to have to, suffer with some meeting times that are going to be maybe really early in the morning or really late at night for you just because of that difference in time zones. Generally, this isn't too much of a problem though, because remote only teams generally work very asynchronously because they all have that willpower and desire to work remotely and set their own hours. They don't have very many meetings, but it is something that comes up every once in a while and something you do need to consider. Another important thing to consider is if you're working at a company that doesn't specialize in remote work, because there's a lot of companies that are remote only, but some companies, have some remote employees and some in-person employees. And it's very important to understand that you need to work for companies that understand how remote work works and that they respect the remote employees. Because when you see your employees every day working in an office, it's very easy to familiarize yourself with them, become friends, really kind of get to know each other well. But your remote workers at the same company, they don't have that same face-to-face daily interaction, so they sometimes get forgotten about. You're not as close with them. They kind of just get pushed off to the wayside. They're like just kind of almost like a second-class citizen in your company because they aren't there interacting in all of the meaningful day-to-day in-person activities. So that's why if you're going to work at a remote company that doesn't specialize in remote work or isn't entirely based around remote work, make sure they at least have some kind of system in place to make it so that the remote workers feel included just as much as the in-person employees. This is especially important because when things like pay raises are considered, a lot of times people think to the people that they're closest with first. So the in-person employees are going to be the first things that pop into managers' minds when they think of pay raises, while the remote workers, if they aren't as engaged in that social activity aspect, they're going to miss out on the potential pay raises, or they may get thought of second or third or last just because they're not there in person at the time, which is another reason why it's really important to make sure the company you apply for specializes and understands how to do remote work properly. Now, probably the last major thing to worry about with remote work is something a lot of people think they can live without, but is actually more difficult than you think, and that's the idea of a social aspect. It's really important as a human to have some kind of social interaction with other people, and when you work remotely, you limit yourself drastically on social interactions because you're not in the office. You don't have the water cooler talk. You don't randomly bump into people walking back and forth and talking with them and just having small little chats here and there because you're remote. The only types of conversation that you have is, through direct messages or maybe through some meetings, but those are generally not as common and they don't happen just by happenstance. Usually they're intentional and they're very work related, so you don't get that same social level of fulfillment just from talking about work as you do from talking about just random things around the water cooler. I know a ton of people that thought they would love remote work, and as soon as COVID hit and they were forced to work from home, they absolutely hated it because they didn't have that social aspect that they normally get at work. And they just felt like they were alone all the time. They felt like they weren't able to connect with people, and they just weren't able to handle the, isolation that is involved with remote work because you really are on your own unless you go out of your way to include yourself in these different types of situations. So even if you're an introverted person and you think that you're going to be fine on your own all the time, you still should take the effort to try to include yourself into conversations and try to make time for chat and communication and socialization that's not directly related to work, because it's incredibly important for making sure that you stay mentally, happy and that you enjoy the job you work at. Now, I talked a bunch about all of the different bad things about remote work, but really there are tons and tons of benefits. I mean, you get to set your own hours, you get to work where you want. You don't have to worry about the negatives that come across, in an office where people are constantly distracting you, so you're able to stay very focused. But it's important to understand with all of that great power and freedom, you need to be able to control the freedom and limit yourself to not work too much, not work too little, and also make sure to still include yourself in socialization, even if you feel like it's taking away from your productive hours, because it'll make you more productive overall, being happier and more social. Now, I hope I didn't turn you away from this by talking about all the negatives of remote work, but it's important to understand whether or not remote work is a good fit for you before you jump into it. Also, if you enjoyed this video, make sure to check out my other videos linked over here and subscribe to my channel for more videos just like this. Thank you very much for watching and have a good day.